We are going to move on to the next item in the agenda, which is the presentation on the city's Climate Champions program by Alex Yee. Alex is the current, I believe, Coastal Water and Program Manager, so I'm very excited to hear about this program.
Mahalo, Chair. Let me bring this up. Are you all seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, again, mahalo, Chair and Commissioners, for the opportunity to present about our Climate Champions program. This year, we actually are, as Matt mentioned, we're wrapping the pilot program from this summer up this afternoon with our Ho'ike. And so I appreciate the opportunity to sort of talk about what we did this summer. So as many of you are probably aware, one of the big projects that our office is working on that is particularly coming out of the adaptation program is that we're working on a new pillar document to correspond to our climate action plan that's focusing on climate adaptation. It's our climate adaptation strategy that we're calling Climate Ready Oahu. And as Director Gonser said, we hope to put that out for public comment in the coming months. But this initiative of Climate Champions really stemmed as part of the Climate Ready Oahu project. So just very briefly, because I know nobody has read Climate Ready Oahu yet, I wanted to just sort of give you a brief overview of the vision. So we want this document to provide a real vision for what a climate ready future could look like here on Oahu. And so our vision statement focuses on three main parts, which are people, aina, and infrastructure, or as I like to call it, people, places, and things. And also a couple of key principles. And I just wanted to pull out two of those principles for the purpose of our discussion today. The first one is local impacts need local solutions. And so when we talk about climate adaptation, what we're talking about is how climate change impacts particular things, particular places, particular people. And so this is just one of many examples of an asset on Oahu that has been impacted by climate change, in this case, coastal erosion. And the result was that this shower and comfort station were removed and no longer functioning for this community. And so the solutions that we look at really to mitigate those impacts really come down to action in this community. So the good news is that because local impacts need local solutions, we as the residents of this island have the capacity and agency in our hands to affect those solutions. The second concept that I wanted to briefly mention is something that I call climate adaptation by any other name. And this is the idea that there's a ton of existing capacity and work being done across the island by folks who are doing it for many reasons. And probably a lot of them aren't thinking about them as like, we're doing climate adaptation work. But the work that they're doing does advance climate adaptation. And so this is a picture of Uncle Eric Enos at Ka'ala Farm. And this valley, before he and his community really started to actively steward it, was just ridge to ridge, Haulikoa, dry as a tinderbox. The water wasn't flowing, those pre-contact lo'i were overgrown, and wildfire was a huge and recurrent problem. And while wildfire still is a huge and recurring problem in Waianae, the wildfire risk in this valley where their work has been, which primarily was about restoring the valley to its previous, lushness and use, has been mitigated. And so while that's not the reason that they were doing it, their work is climate adaptation. And so we wanted to make sure that we're recognizing the work that's happening in community that is climate adaptation, even if that's not what people are calling it. So, you know, in our various rounds of community engagement, one of the rounds we did with an equity focus was working through community-based organizations, particularly on the Waianae side and on the North Shore. And so at the end of that community outreach phase, we had a sort of wrap-up meeting. And one of the concepts that came out of that wrap-up meeting was that community orgs want to be part of the solution. They want to be kept up with the latest climate information. They need access to this data. They need access to, you know, permissions and things like that. And so we really were, the conclusion from this and what we heard from these community orgs was, you know, let's be part of the solution together. And so something that came from those three things, local impacts needing local solutions, climate adaptation by any other name, and the push for more collaboration and partnership between community orgs and the city, led us to this idea of climate championship from the community. And so this Climate Champions program is being memorialized in the forthcoming climate adaptation strategy as an action under a whole strategy, which is focused on amplifying and increasing capacity for community-led climate adaptation. And so really the way that it's designed is that there's these three elements. There's, of course, the city, which is primarily our office. There are community organizations, which are going to be our partners. They're going to be ideally long-term partners that we can develop good working relationships with. And then there's actual individual climate champions who are going to be like on a year-to-year basis doing a particular project hosted by and under the supervision of these community organizations. And so this climate championship program, because it really is about the building relationships, building working relationships between the city and community, is sort of like one of many components of Climate Ready Oahu that is really thinking ahead toward how can we implement. Obviously the city and county has a lot of kuleana over things that are vital to climate adaptation, like infrastructure and policies. But we also don't have the capacity to do everything. And we're probably also, not the best people to do certain types of things. The communities really have capacity and expertise to do certain types of actions at the community and neighborhood scale. And so the community partners that we're working with for this pilot are the Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization, Ma'alama Pu'uloa, Ma'alama Local AF Foundation, Key Project, Ma'alama Learning Center. And we had amazing support for some of the events we did from the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, Hawaii Data Collaborative, and journalists from Hawaii News Now. And so this is sort of the structure of what we did this summer. This is sort of how we worked with the champions. So the very first thing was that we worked with the community-based organizations to identify a climate adaptation project. And so this project is meant to be something that aligns with their mission, but also aligns with Climate Ready Oahu. So they're getting work done that's helping to advance their mission, and we're also seeing through implementation of Climate Ready Oahu. Following that, we worked with them to identify the actual individual champions. And in this case, most of those folks were already people who were working with the organizations. We hosted an orientation where we sort of laid out this program for the summer. We organized 3 professional development workshops, which I'll talk a little bit more about in the coming slides. We hosted monthly check-ins with all of the champions to ensure that they had support and opportunities to, develop Pilina as a cohort. And then later this afternoon, we'll be hosting the wrap-up Ho'ike for them to show off the work that they did and to be celebrated and spotlighted, which was another one of those actions. So the first professional development workshop was done out at Moku'olo'e, the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, and major thanks to Dr. Romine for agreeing to be our guest speaker. And he presented about this commission's climate change brief. So he gave them, Climate Science 101, and then our champions were given the opportunity to tour the island and learn about some of the climate-related work that they're doing with corals, for example. The second professional development workshop that we did was hosted by the Hawaii Data Collaborative. And so the Hawaii Data Collaborative their mission is to make data available, particularly in advancing things like affordable housing and social justice. And so they helped our champions sort of understand existing data tools, existing free tools like Google Data Lab that they could use to analyze and report data. And I think it was helpful for the champions and the orgs to be able to ask questions about how they are currently using and reporting on data, because that's a need that community-based organizations constantly have, right, for reporting. And then our last professional development workshop was on climate storytelling. So, once people are doing these projects and they have data, really the most important thing is actually how we communicate this work, right? How we explain the benefits to people and relevance to their lives. And so we were joined by a reporter from Hawaii News Now. One of the things that she does is she is the host of a podcast called Repairing Earth that highlights individuals here in Hawaii that are working on advancing climate work. We were hosted out at the Loko'ea Fish Pond, and we had an opportunity to learn from her about how to, craft a narrative, understand your audience, choose visuals, pick the right starting place for your story, and those types of things. And so I just also wanted to talk a little bit about the adaptation projects that our champions actually did this summer. So Malama Pu'uloa was focused on trying to create a green food corridor that they're calling Kealaloa in Pu'uloa along the bike path. Malama Learning Center has been focused on urban heat and trees, education, and giveaways on the Waianae side. Our champion at Key Project has been hosting community meetings to try and organize folks on fighting the little fire ants invasion. Hawaii Wildfire has been hosting, including just last night, this picture is from last night's meeting, about communities to learn more about organizing through Firewise. And then Loko'ea hosted a community meeting that talked about climate change and the impacts of climate change on their work, in addition to having a work day. So those are just some of the projects that folks worked on this year. This year was our pilot, and we didn't have any funding, so all of the work that these organizations did, all of the time that they invested, was just purely out of their commitment and dedication to this work. and also because they really understand that this work is related to their missions and the work that they're already trying to do. But earlier this year, we applied for a grant from the EPA through their Environmental Justice Government to Government Grant Program. We should hear back in November, that's what they said, could be later. But if we get this grant, we will be able to start funding the program for the next 3 years. And that means being able to compensate our champions for their time, being able to fund their projects, and then being able to provide administrative support to the community-based organizations. I want to mahalo this commission for writing a support letter for this application. In addition, we have support from the University of Hawaii Climate Resilience Collaborative and Institute for Sustainability and Resiliency to help support some of the professional development. And then we've also been talking with folks at the Harold K.L. Castle Foundation. They're also interested in helping to support this work. So we're very excited for the opportunity to sort of expand this going forward. Definitely stay tuned. We're gonna be adaptive. We're gonna be adaptable no matter what comes. And then I wanted to take an opportunity to sort of plug the Ho'ike one last time in case you haven't heard it enough. It is today from 2 to 4 at Honolulu Hale. Almost all of the organizations will be there with materials, a poster, and you'll get to sort of mingle and talk to them about their work and about their organizations. And so we highly encourage it's open to the public. Everyone is invited and welcome to come down. So that's it. Mahalo.
Thank you so much for educating us about this wonderful collaboration and partnership between community voices and what we're doing here in the city. I wanted to open it up for any comments and questions from the other commissioners. Let's start with Commissioner Romine.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, we just want to mahalo Alex for that overview, and thank you also for putting together, you and all the folks involved in this at CCSR, putting together this really exciting program. It was a real pleasure to meet this current cohort of climate champions at the event out at Moku'aloe, and I did give that overview of the climate brief, so it was really nice to have that resource available. But I was really kind of blown away by the knowledge level of the climate champions that came through, and the questions and the discussions we had on the content that was shared on that brief. So it's a really good group of people, and it's really great to see the coordination, this type of coordination going on between local government and community, which we need so much more of. So I'm really excited about this program and excited to see the efforts towards continuing to grow it.